The reason why Bambi's and Sierra's names are currently trending on social media is straightforward. Certain receipts are being discussed that have the potential to completely upend Kirk Frost's career. Fans initially believed the murmurs to be just another standard love and hip-hop plot point. But stress increased as screenshots, videos, and mysterious captions began to appear. According to sources, Bambi and Sierra are working together on a project that doesn't seem like small time. Retaliation. Kirk's entire legacy is the subject of what seems to be a well-planned attack. According to insiders, information these two are holding could instantly destroy Kirk's reputation in the profession if it were made public. The question now is, are these receipts authentic or merely a publicity stunt? Behind the scenes, the cast is engaged in a silent Cold War. Fans are split, and producers are having emergency meetings. We may be seeing the endgame if this proves to be accurate. Nothing could have prepared anyone for the unexpected tempest that struck the hip-hop and love circles, even though the rumors had been brewing for weeks. The beginning was modest, almost like background noise, with a few mysterious postings from Sierra, some well-crafted captions from Bambi, and some dubious emojis that admirers started analyzing right away. But the energy completely changed during the past 48 hours. It could no longer be mistaken. These two women weren't merely agitating the situation. The entire kitchen was going to be set on fire. Group chats, blogs, and private direct messages all revealed that Bambi and Sierra had obtained what they referred to as undeniable proof. Everyone was certain that Kirk Frost's reputation was hanging by a single fraying thread because of the way it was being depicted, even though no one knew exactly what that meant. According to those with knowledge of the matter, the anxiety began long before the alleged receipts were even there. For months, Bambi and Kirk had been having private arguments, with her being more patient whenever she thought he was crossing lines with members of their social circle. At first, she kept it to herself, attempting to make things look nice at public gatherings and suppressing her annoyance. However, there were times when she began to doubt everything: small gaffes at parties, overheard remarks while filming, etc. Sierra, on the other hand, had a convoluted past with Kirk. They ran in rings that overlapped, although they weren't particularly close. She also began to pay more attention when she noticed certain trends in his conduct. They were calculating episodes in their own mental scorecards, seemingly unaware that they were all leading to the same catastrophic climax. One insider claims that a late-night after-party was the pivotal moment. The cameras were off, the wine was flowing, and everyone seemed at ease. Kirk found himself in a corner, engaging in what appeared to be a heated discussion with a character from the program that nobody knew. Bambi saw but did not intervene. As Kirk leaned in and laughed in a way that didn't sit well with her, she just watched, her eyes narrowing. Sierra would tell a friend later that evening that she witnessed the same interaction and thought, this is going to be a problem. However, neither of them took any action until weeks later, when fragments of a larger image started to emerge. A video clip was used for the first piece. The quality was remarkably sharp for something, albeit it was unclear where it had been taken with a phone. Kirk and the same unnamed woman from the after-party were depicted. This time it was in what appeared to be a hotel lobby. The body language was indisputable, even though they weren't doing anything explicitly incriminating. In a way that raised eyebrows, it was familiar, easygoing, and close. It seems that a mutual acquaintance gave Bambi access to the clip, and she was horrified to see it. She could have dismissed it as lighthearted banter, but Kirk's expression made it clear to her that this was more than that. Shortly thereafter, Sierra made a gift. She had been following several accounts on social media, and one day she happened onto a post that, until she read the caption, appeared to have nothing to do with it. It talked about being flown out, staying in the city's finest suite, and receiving royal treatment from an unidentified person. The time coincided nicely with a weekend that Kirk had been in another city on business, but the post was ambiguous, enough to suggest anything. Sierra quickly made the connection after she began to look further. Off the record, a mutual acquaintance verified that the woman in the post was the same one from the hotel clip and the after party. At this point, Bambi and Sierra became aware that they were sharing a common rumor. When assembled, the puzzle they were holding revealed a damning tale. They began exchanging notes, assembling timetables, and conversing more. It appeared worse the more they compared. Text messages, voice notes, and hotel receipts all alluded to discussions Kirk would prefer his inner circle and others outside not to hear. They took their time releasing anything. Rather, they were astute, holding back the facts and allowing the tension to build until the proper moment. Word began to circulate among the actors behind the scenes. It was evident in how people regarded Kirk in group scenes and how discussions changed when he walked in. Some made an effort to avoid it, saying they didn't want to become embroiled in trivial matters. Others, however, couldn't contain their interest. Kirk initially appeared unaware, but according to those closest to him, he became suspicious when he realized that Bambi and Sierra were talking more frequently and occasionally laughing as he passed. The public got its first real clue. Sierra appeared on a local radio station for a live interview. The host inquired about recent cast drama. Halfway through the meeting, even though she was there to promote her most recent business endeavor, the internet exploded with excitement as Sierra grinned, leaned forward, and continued, "Let's just say some people aren't who they pretend to be on camera. And when the truth comes out, it's going to change a lot." Within hours, followers were naming Kirk in dubious memes, leaving speculations in the comments, and analyzing every word of the conversation as if it were a court deposition. Though Bambi's play was more subdued, it was just as powerful. On her Instagram story, she shared a single image of a man's hand holding a hotel keycard, the type with the room number printed on the envelope, but without a name or face. However, the wristwatch was one that Kirk's admirers had seen him wear innumerable times. After only 3 minutes, she removed the message, but by then, screenshots had appeared on all of the main gossip websites. The conjecture was no longer limited to the internet. It permeated every event, even private productions, every filming location, gatherings. It was becoming obvious that this was more than petty slights. Kirk was deliberately placed in a situation where he would have to respond to inquiries. It was difficult for him to avoid, and the feeling of inevitability intensified with each new rumor and mysterious post. There was an impending event, and it would be hard to miss when it landed. Before the second week arrived, there was a lot of friction in the love and hip-hop community. Every conversation felt burdened. Kirk was finding it more difficult to act, as though he was unaware that something was about to happen because every look had weight. Whatever Bambi and Sierra had, they weren't giving it all up at once, which was the issue. Rather, they appeared to be stoking the flames in tiny, precisely timed bursts, which kept the audience and the actors on edge. So that's how they were using it, not simply what they had. The scenario caused a silent rift among the producers. It was regarded by some as excellent television. Whether it was genuine or not, they let fans fill in the spaces with their own hypotheses, letting the guesswork do the heavy lifting. Kirk was unable to move without someone giving him the side look at this point. During a recent public appearance, he was observed anxiously, looking across the crowd as if someone were going to yell something at him. Social media turned into a battlefield unto itself. A few hours later, Sierra followed up with a mirror selfie with the words, "Some people's truth is uglier than their lies." Sierra's picture was untagged, but Bambi's video showed her entering a boutique with the message, "Getting ready for the big reveal." There was no mention of names, but there was no need for them. Kirk's name was plastered all over the comments, and gossip blogs started creating their own timelines with screenshots, arrows, and conspiracy-style images. In the meantime, a few actors were starting to feel anxious. According to reports, Rasheeda was avoiding group filming days whenever possible and had been remarkably silent throughout this entire ordeal. During a break and during filming, one staff member said she heard Bambi and Sierra giggling in the corner and left the scene. The source claimed she doesn't know what they have, but she is aware that it won't be good. Kirk was repairing the damage himself behind closed doors, in an attempt to ascertain what had been spoken. He contacted a few individuals he believed might have been in contact with Bambi and Sierra. He offered to clarify misunderstandings in a few instances. In others, he explicitly requested allegiance. However, too many individuals were already involved in the play, which was the issue. For some, it served as their pass to more TV time. Others merely wished to observe the mayhem. The most telling incident occurred at a small, exclusive cast meeting in a club. Kirk arrived late and forced a smile, obviously trying to pretend nothing was wrong. He spent the majority of the evening chatting casually with other cast members and avoiding Bambi and Sierra completely. But once, Sierra approached him directly, leaned close enough to be captured on camera, and stated, "We've got what we need." Kirk froze. Even if it was brief, it was sufficient. The conversation was captured by fans in the backdrop of an online video, and the video became viral in a matter of hours. Everything changed in that instant. All of a sudden, there was more conjecture than merely what the revenues might be. The question was when they would fall. The precise episode began to be predicted by fans. Some are even posting countdowns. Kirk, meanwhile, was becoming more and more tense every day. He immediately checked his phone whenever it buzzed. His name was trending whenever Sierra or Bambi shared anything even slightly provocative. At last, the producers made the decision to embrace the drama. They planned a group setting where Sierra, Bambi, and Kirk would all be in the same area and have nowhere to hide. It was a celebration of another cast member's effort, and the setup was straightforward. However, everyone was aware that the true goal was to test Spark's ability to fly. The air was electrifying as soon as the three of them entered the room. Sierra continued to watch Kirk. Bambi's remarks were succinct, and Kirk continued to stare at the door as if he were making plans to get out. Although there was no full-fledged altercation at the conclusion of the evening, it was obvious that the tension had escalated. It was not going to be subtle, whatever it was. And Kirk had every right to be concerned. The smirks on Bambi's and Sierra's faces as they walked away together were any guide. The cast was surrounded by a totally different atmosphere. Everyone could sense the dense tension that had replaced the lighthearted shading and superficial drama as soon as Kirk entered the room. He was much more defensive now, as if he were preparing for a blow each time the cameras rolled. Speculation regarding the alleged receipts that Sierra and Bambi were in possession of had evolved beyond mere rumors. They had adopted a own life. Social media fans began following both women everywhere, analyzing every post, every emoji, and every obscure song lyric in the captions, in search of hints. Backstage, prior to filming a sequence involving food that had been teased by executives for weeks, according to crew personnel, Kirk showed up earlier than normal and was pacing in a peaceful spot while holding his phone, inquiring about the seating arrangements and whether Bambi and Sierra were confirmed to be present. He was tense. He clearly intended to exert as much control over the surroundings as he could. However, the reality was that he could no longer control the surroundings. The energy in the room was instantly electrifying when the camera began to film. On one side of the table, Bambi leaned back in her chair with the assurance of someone who knew she was in control. Just a few seats away, Sierra kept her phone on the table, face down, and occasionally ran her finger along the edge as though to remind Kirk that it was still there. The talk was light at first. Future plans, business endeavors, and lighthearted jokes. The makers, however, were aware that this would not endure. The transition they were anticipating arrived sooner than they had anticipated. Bambi began in a casual tone, but her gaze was fixed on Kirk. People occasionally believe they have permanent influence over the story. However, there comes a time when the truth can no longer be suppressed. There was silence at the table. Even the background conversation at adjacent tables became quieter. Kirk took a while to answer. Rather, he sipped his drink slowly and put it down with a purposeful composure that contrasted with the glint of rage in his eyes. Kirk asked in a low voice that was sharp enough for the microphones to pick up. "You think this is funny?" said Bambi. "I believe it's justice." Theories about what was on that phone were all over fan pages by the next morning. Some people insisted it was a video. Some thought it was a series of incriminating messages. According to one especially lurid story, it was a financial document linking Kirk to a covert investment that contradicted everything he had established as the face of his company. Behind the scenes, Kirk was repairing the damage, according to a close source. He was meeting with producers to talk about changing the season's plot in an effort to deflect attention from Bambi and Sierra's charges. However, the issue was that the momentum had already out of his grasp. Days later, Bambi was questioned directly about the receipts in a radio interview. She smiled at the host as she leaned closer. She teased, "Let's say, you'll see why we claimed it was over when you see them." Within hours, the video went viral, and the hashtag #It'sOverKirk began trending across several media. By sharing a picture of herself with Bambi, Sierra stoked the flames. They are both clutching phones with Truth season-related captions. The parts with comments was a battleground, with supporters calling for Kirk to answer, others pleading for the receipts to be made public right away, and some supporting him by saying it was all a plot point to boost viewers. It wasn't any better on set. Kirk was beginning to lose the support of his normal supporters. Rasheeda avoided getting caught in the crossfire by remaining curious, but conspicuously aloof during scenes with Bambi and Sierra. She avoided eye contact and stuck to neutral subjects whenever the truth was brought up. However, it was no longer only about what was captured on camera. Off camera, it was what was simmering. In order to get Bambi and Sierra to talk more candidly about their reasons, producers had been covertly recording more confessionals with them. They left enough hints to keep fans interested even though they didn't explicitly expose the receipts. One of these confessionals contained one of Sierra's most well-known quotes. "People sometimes get away with crimes because no one wants to talk about them. However, we are no longer afraid." This remark struck a chord, spurring debates throughout fan sites and group chats. Who were all of them? What had been concealed? Exactly. How far down did it go? In subsequent episodes, Kirk, for his part, started to appear noticeably worn down. His formerly assured stance seems to have given way to reserved body language, stayed out of crowds, and his conversations with Rasheeda had a weight to them that had not been present previously. Bambi and Sierra appeared happy to let the suspense grow as the image's fractures began to reveal. Fans went into overdrive as the next episode's trailer was released. The 30-second clip cut to Sierra in a confessional, grinning as she said, "Oh, I know exactly what I'm talking about." The screen went black, and the words "next week" flashed across. Kirk had just gotten up from a table, pointing across at someone off camera and yelling, "You don't know what you're talking about." By the end of the day, the discussion had expanded beyond Kirk's career's viability. It concerned whether this was the start of the end of his complete tenure on the M Show. The cast has never encountered anything like the days before the next shoot. Drama was no longer the only thing. There seemed to be a real countdown. In corners, crew members whispered. The sound techs looked at each other with a knowing look. The producers also moved around with a subdued enthusiasm that only arises when they know that the story was being picked up by blogs, gossip websites, even major entertainment outlets, which framed it as the greatest danger to Kirk's reputation in years. Kirk had made an effort to maintain a low profile by skipping social gatherings with other cast members and making few appearances. But his name was everywhere, even when he wasn't there. While some insiders swore he was attempting to bargain with producers to have some material deleted before it aired, others said he was spending a lot of time with legal counsel. It's the fact that Bambi and Sierra were going above and beyond in their own ways, making sure that every interview, Instagram Live, and public appearance had just the right amount of spice to keep the audience interested didn't help either. On the day of filming, the setting was an upscale rooftop lounge with a view of the city. Everyone knew it was meant to be a scene of celebration, something light to counterbalance the dark plots. Just the seating chart was made to have the most possible impact. With just a little bouquet between them, Kirk and Rasheeda were positioned precisely across from Bambi and Sierra. The tension was heavy from the beginning. Every false smile and every quick glance was caught on camera. The talk first focused on safe subjects, people in common, clothes, and the weather. The spark would eventually strike the powder, though. The unwritten rule to keep things peaceful was broken first by Sierra. With her elbows resting on the table, she leaned forward and spoke in a casual yet impactful tone. You, Bambi, grinned and said, or maybe it's the best possible time, depending on who you ask. Kirk's brows narrowed and his jaw tensed. Have you ever noticed how the truth has a way of showing up at the worst possible time? Rasheeda shifted uneasily, looking at Kirk before speaking. You two really think you're clever, huh? Playing these little games for attention. Games? Sierra shot back, her voice breaking through the background chatter. This isn't a game. This is years of watching someone pretend to be one thing in public while doing something entirely different in private. You've been walking around acting untouchable, and now you're finally going to feel what it's like when people stop protecting you. Bambi interrupted, calm but firm, saying this isn't the time or the place. The crew hung on every word, and even the lounge's background music seemed to fade into nothing. Kirk leaned back in his chair, trying to project control, but his hands were clenched tightly in his lap. Then Sierra reached for her phone. Kirk's voice was low, but there was no hiding the edge. If you think you can spin whatever's on that phone into something real, you're going to regret it. Bambi didn't flinch. It's not about spinning anything. It's about letting people see who you really are. Rasheeda finally entered, her tone sharper now. The motion was slow and deliberate, and every eye at the table followed it. She tapped the screen, scrolled for a moment, and then turned it toward Bambi. After the clip leaked, fans started speculating wildly about what could be so serious that both Bambi and Sierra would risk putting it on national television. Some thought it was infidelity, others said it had something to do with business deals, and a few whispered about an incident from years ago that had never been shown. Enough. You're not about to sit here and act like you know everything that goes on in our lives. We don't just know, Sierra said steadily. We can prove it. The two women appeared utterly unfazed, posting glitzy pictures of themselves together with captions like, "Patience is power, and the truth doesn't need defending." Meanwhile, Kirk's camp reportedly rushed to do damage control in the days that followed, according to anonymous sources, and he was attempting to persuade mutual friends to keep their distance from Bambi and Sierra. The next teaser trailer followed, and this one was even more dramatic than the previous one. It began with Kirk rising and pointing straight at Bambi and Sierra while shouting, "You don't know the whole story?" Bambi retaliated, "We know enough to end this for you." The screen cut to Sierra in a confessional, staring straight into the camera. "The next time we sit at a table together, he's not walking away the same man." That one line was enough to set off fan theories once more, with people pulling old clips from previous seasons trying to make connections, and debating whether Kirk was really facing the kind of scandal that could end his career, or if this was all for the ratings. Behind the scenes, the atmosphere on set had completely changed, with even cast members who had previously avoided drama taking sides. Some cast members avoided filming with Kirk entirely, while others kept interaction strictly in one of those extra confessionals. Bambi summarized her position in a way that went viral right away. "People love to say we're messy, but sometimes Messy is the only way to clean up a bigger mess. Kirk, on the other hand, appeared to be running out of moves. The once confident, unshakable figure was now visibly frustrated in scenes, snapping at minor comments and avoiding direct eye contact with Bambi and Sierra. Producers, sensing they had a season-defining storyline on their hands, reportedly ordered extra shoots to capture reactions from as many angles as possible. The power dynamic had changed, and everyone could see it. The night before the next filming, Sierra went live on Instagram. Thousands of people watched from inside. "You find this amusing?" Kirk asked, his voice low but sharp enough for the mics to catch. "No," Bambi replied. "I think it's justice." By the next morning, fan pages were flooded with theories about what was on that phone. Some swore it was a video. Others believed it was a string of damning messages. One particularly wild rumor claimed it was a financial document tying Kirk to a secret investment that went against everything he had built his public image on. The clip went viral within hours, and the hashtag #RIt'sOverKirk began trending on multiple platforms. Meanwhile, Kirk was working behind the scenes to repair the damage. According to a close source, he was meeting with producers to discuss narrative adjustments for the season in an attempt to deflect attention from Bambi and Sierra's accusations. When Bambi was asked directly about the receipts in a radio interview a few days later, she leaned in and smiled at the host, teasing, "When you see them, you'll understand why we said it's over." In order to avoid getting caught in the crossfire, Rasheeda was courteous but conspicuously aloof during scenes with Bambi and Sierra, sticking to neutral topics and avoiding eye contact whenever the subject of the truth came up. However, it was no longer just about what was happening on camera. Sierra stoked the fire by posting a picture of herself with Bambi, both of them holding their phones with captions about Truth Season. The comment sections were a battleground, with fans demanding Kirk respond, others pleading for the receipts to be released immediately, and some defending him, arguing that it was all a plot for ratings. One of Sierra's most talked about lines came from one of these confessionals. "Sometimes people get away with things because everyone's too scared to speak. We're not scared anymore." Producers had been surreptitiously filming additional confessionals with Bambi and Sierra, encouraging them to talk more openly about their motivations. They didn't explicitly reveal the receipts, but they left enough clues to keep fans interested. This line resonated, igniting discussions on fan forums and group chats. But who was everyone? In later episodes, Kirk started to appear visibly worn down. His once confident posture seemed to give way to guarded body language. He avoided lingering in group settings, and his interactions with Rasheeda had a heaviness that hadn't been there before. The cracks in the image were beginning to show, and Bambi and Sierra seemed content to let the suspense build. Then the upcoming episode's 30-second trailer arrived, sending fans into overdrive. Kirk got up from a table, pointed across at someone off camera, and yelled, "You don't know what you're talking about." "Oh, I know exactly what I'm talking about." Sierra smirked as the scene shifted to her in a confessional. The words "next week" flashed across the screen as it went black. By the end of that day, the discussion had shifted from whether Kirk's career could survive to whether this was the beginning of the end for his time on the M Show altogether. The cast had never experienced anything like the days leading up to the next filming. It felt like a real countdown, not just drama. Crew members whispered in corners. The sound techs exchanged knowing glances. And the producers walked around with a kind of quiet excitement that only comes when they know they've got something that will shake the show to its core. Rumors of what Bambi and Sierra were sitting on had exploded beyond the set. Blogs, gossip sites, and even mainstream entertainment outlets were picking up the story, framing it as the biggest threat to Kirk's public image in years. Kirk had tried to keep a low profile, limiting his appearances and avoiding social events with other cast members, but even in his absence, his name was everywhere. The location was a fancy rooftop lounge with a view of the city on the day of filming. It was supposed to be a celebration scene, something light to counterbalance the heavy storylines, but everyone knew better. The seating chart alone had been designed for maximum impact, with Kirk and Rasheeda sitting directly across from Bambi and Sierra, with only a small floral arrangement between them. The tension was high from the beginning, and the cameras caught every forced smile and darting glance. At first, the conversation revolved around safe subjects, mutual friends, fashion, and the weather. But it was only a matter of time until the spark struck the powder. You ever notice how the truth has a way of showing up at the worst possible time? Bambi smirked, adding, or maybe it's the best possible time, depending on who you ask. Sierra was the first to break the unwritten rule to keep things civil, leaning forward and resting her elbows on the table. Kirk's eyes narrowed and his jaw tightened. "You two really think you're clever, huh? Playing these little games for attention. Games," Sierra shot back, her voice breaking through the background noise. "This isn't a game. This is years of witnessing someone act one way in public while doing something completely different in private." Rasheeda shifted uneasily, looking at Kirk before speaking. "This isn't the time or the place." However, Bambi said calmly but firmly, "Actually, it's exactly the time and the place. You've been walking around acting untouchable, and now you're going to feel what it's like when people stop protecting you." Even the lounge's background music seemed to fade into nothing as the crew remained silent, waiting for every word. Kirk leaned back in his chair, trying to project control, but his hands were clenched tightly in his lap. Then Sierra reached for her phone, a slow, deliberate motion that caught everyone's attention at the table. She tapped the screen, scrolled for a moment, and then turned it toward Bambi. The two women exchanged a look that was half warning, half satisfaction. Kirk's voice was low, but there was no hiding the edge. "It's not about spinning anything. It's about letting people see who you really are." Bambi didn't flinch. Rasheeda finally entered, her tone sharper now. "Enough. You're not about to sit here and act like you know everything that goes on in our lives." "We don't just know," Sierra said steadily. "We can prove it." That was the line that sent the internet into a frenzy after the video leaked. The two women appeared completely unfazed, posting glamorous photos together with captions like "Patience is power" and "The truth doesn't need defending." In the days that followed, Kirk's camp reportedly scrambled to do damage control, with anonymous sources claiming he was reaching out to mutual friends, trying to persuade them to distance themselves from Bambi and Sierra. Fans started speculating wildly about what could be so serious that both Bambi and Sierra would risk putting it on national television. Some claimed it was infidelity, while others said it was related to business deals, and a few whispered about an incident from years ago that had never made it to air. "You don't know the whole story," Kirk yelled, standing and pointing straight at Bambi and Sierra in the opening scene of the next teaser trailer, which was even more intense than the previous one. "We know enough to end this for you, Bambi." Shot back immediately. That one sentence was enough to start fan ideas anew. "The next time we sit at a table together, it's not walking away the same man." The screen shifted to Sierra in a confessional, staring straight into the camera. Behind the scenes, the atmosphere on set had completely changed. Even cast members who generally avoided drama were now subtly taking sides. Some avoided filming with Kirk altogether, while others kept interactions strictly professional, worried about the fallout. Producers, sensing they had a season-defining plot on their hands, reportedly ordered extra shoots to capture reactions from as many angles as possible. In one of those extra confessionals, Bambi summed up her position in a way that instantly went viral. People started pulling old clips from previous seasons, trying to make connections, and debating whether this was all for ratings or if Kirk was really facing the kind of scandal that could end his career. The power dynamic had changed, and everyone could see it. The night before the next shoot, Sierra went live on Instagram, and thousands of people watched. Kirk, on the other hand, appeared to be running out of moves. The once assured, unflappable figure was now clearly frustrated in scenes, snapping at small remarks and avoiding direct eye contact with Bambi and Sierra.